One of the most comforting and profound promises in the Bible is God's assurance of provision. In Philippians chapter 4 verse 19, Paul writes, "And my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus." This simple yet powerful statement addresses one of the fundamental concerns of every human being: the need for provision in all aspects of life. Whether our needs are physical, emotional, or spiritual, God's promise to provide for us offers comfort, peace, and hope. In today's world, many people are focused on self-sufficiency. Society often teaches us to rely on our own skills, talents, and efforts to meet our needs. While it's important to work hard, be responsible, and use our abilities, the Bible teaches us that our ultimate source of provision is not our own strength, but God. He knows our needs better than we do, and He promises to supply everything we truly need. This doesn't mean we sit back and do nothing, expecting God to drop everything into our laps. Instead, it means we work with the understanding that God is the one who blesses our efforts and provides the resources necessary for us to thrive. Trusting God over self-sufficiency. God's promise to meet our needs goes beyond just the material things we often focus on. In Matthew chapter 6 verses 25 to 34, Jesus reminds us not to worry about what we will eat, drink, or wear. He points out that God cares for the birds of the air and the flowers of the field, neither of which work or worry, yet they are provided for. Jesus uses this example to teach us that if God cares so much for these lesser things, how much more will He care for us, His children? He assures us that God knows exactly what we need and He is faithful to provide. Worrying about our daily needs is a natural human tendency, especially when we face uncertain times. Financial struggles, health problems, and emotional hardships can easily make us anxious. But God's promise to provide is a reminder that we don't have to carry the burden of these worries alone. By trusting in God's provision, we can let go of the constant stress and anxiety that often accompany life's challenges. Instead, we can rest in the knowledge that God is aware of our needs and is working to meet them in ways that are often beyond our understanding. Living in peace instead of fear. When we internalize the promise of God's provision, it transforms the way we live. Instead of being driven by fear and anxiety, we can live in a state of peace. This doesn't mean that life will always be easy or that we won't face difficulties. Rather, it means that even in the midst of challenges, we have a deep assurance that God is in control and will take care of us. This peace is one of the greatest gifts that comes from trusting in God's provision. In a world that constantly pushes us to accumulate more and achieve more, God's promise reminds us that our value is not based on what we own or accomplish. Our true worth comes from being loved by God, and His provision is a reflection of His care and love for us. When we realize this, it changes our priorities. We begin to focus less on material things and more on the things that truly matter: our relationship with God, our family, and our ability to help others. Moving beyond material needs. God's promise of provision is not limited to our material needs. He also meets our emotional and spiritual needs. Life can be full of emotional burdens including stress, fear, loneliness, and sadness. But God is not distant from these struggles. He cares about our emotional well-being and promises to provide comfort, peace, and strength. In Psalm chapter 34 verse 18 we are told, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." This promise reminds us that even in our darkest moments, God is with us, providing the emotional support we need to endure. Spiritually, God's provision is most evident through the gift of Jesus Christ. Through His life, death, and resurrection, Jesus provided the ultimate solution to our greatest need: salvation and reconciliation with God. In Romans chapter 8 verse 32, Paul writes, "He who did not spare His own Son, but gave Him up for us all, how will He not also along with Him graciously give us all things?" This verse beautifully illustrates the extent of God's generosity. If God was willing to give us His Son, we can trust that He will provide everything else we need to live a life that honors Him. A call to trust. In conclusion, reflecting on God's promise of provision should lead us to greater trust in Him. It's an invitation to depend on God rather than our own abilities, and to live with the assurance that He knows our needs and will meet them. This trust allows us to live in peace, free from the constant worry that often accompanies daily life. It also encourages us to be generous, sharing with others out of the abundance that God has given us. As we trust in God's provision, we begin to see His faithfulness more clearly in our lives. Every day becomes an opportunity to experience His care and to reflect that care to others. Whether our needs are physical, emotional, or spiritual, we can rest in the knowledge that God is more than able to provide for us. All we need to do is trust in His promises and live in the peace and generosity that come from that trust.